she's aware.
There,
Right, I think the mics are back on now. OK, sorry for the delay. So we're doing Parish Council speaking, and we have Jonathan Duckworth, Mayor of Nailsworth Town Council. If you could go to the public speaking microphone, and again, you'll have 8 minutes, and I'll... Well, no, of course, we've got the clock working now, so... But I will... If it looks like you've lost track of the time, I will give you a warning 30 seconds before the end, OK?
Thank you, Chair and Councillors. This is the clock. I've got a timer here, so I'm okay. Thank you, Chair and Councillors. I'm Jonathan Duckworth, Mayor of Nailsworth and a Forest Green Rovers supporter of 19 years. Forest Green Rovers has been a large part of the community and town for 130 years. It's known worldwide and helps put Nailsworth on the map. As an ambassador for the town, I rarely meet someone who has not heard of Nailsworth and Forest Green Rovers. We are hugely proud of what the football club has done. The community is like a jigsaw, and FGR is a large piece of the jigsaw that is Nailsworth. When you look at the jigsaw, you see the picture, but when pieces are lost, the picture becomes unclear, weak, and hazy. This large jigsaw piece, this green club, now wishes to move away from its community, ironically, to develop a greenfield site. This will damage our market town centre. Nailsworth Town Council, like Stroud District Council, has declared a climate emergency. Ensuring the viability of the town centre is crucial. A report on the impact of a stadium move has been submitted. This underestimates impacts. The headline figure is 0.07% loss of turnover. The impact on affected businesses is over double that. However, turnover is not the key. That is net profit and viability. Businesses with low net profit, such as many of the small businesses in Nailsworth, will be devastated by turnover loss. Lost business means lost jobs and more environmentally unsound journeys out of the town. The predictions of spend and future behaviour are based on limited data and don't conform to best practice. One assumption is that some expenditure from a new stadium will come to Nailsworth. This ignores diversion to Gloucester and assumes the new stadium is full from day one. So their own report implies the new stadium is too small. Pressures on market towns are cumulative. It only takes one decision to tip the balance. The District Council cannot influence many of the pressures, but its decision here can have a positive and decisive effect on the viability of the market town of Nailsworth. It assumes, this is the report, that football congestion has an impact on our market town centre. In fact, the congestion does not occur at busy times, but after closing on Saturdays and on Tuesday evenings. 100 additional houses at the top of the hill would have a far greater effect. Currently, there is scant evidence of a strategic approach to match-day travel. This results in congestion and parking issues and wound-up residents. Laudably, the club aims to lead the world in sustainability at sports grounds. However, most sports clubs and stadia cannot move. Their response to climate emergency has to be in their existing grounds. The greenest football club in the world should not waste all the embedded CO2 in the existing stadium by building a brand new one on untouched green field by a motorway. Instead, it could provide the world with an exemplar, a model of how any existing sports stadium can be made truly green. the club could be enthusiastically devising ways of transporting people to facilities, a model for all similar locations across the country and the world. But they want to take the easy way out, a conventional solution. The predominant mode of transport will inevitably be the private motor car. Recent reports have shown that the benefit of electric cars is heavily outweighed by the public's SUV buying behaviour. Tackling climate change is not going to be easy. We are crying out for innovation that leads to changes in behaviour. Instead, we have a boilerplate application that looks backwards, a natural successor to motorway developments of the last 40 years. This is not a new green model, but an old classic car-based development. It will damage the market town community it leaves, and it will damage the community it moves to. Please refuse it.
Thank you. Right, we now come to the slot for those who wish to oppose the application, and I have Edwin, Dave, 3 people are going to be splitting the 8 minutes. I understand that you know the split that you're going to do, so I'll just leave you to it. But you have only got 8 minutes between the 3 of you. So, Edwin Davies, Keep Eastington Rural. Yep. Okay. Keep an eye on the clock.
Keep Eastington Rural wish to highlight the following: noise and sustainability. Noise would not normally be of great concern when planning a stadium such as this. However, we have in Eastington, close to this site, William Morris House, where they specialise in helping young people with learning difficulties and disabilities, such as autism. Many with autism have an intense sensitivity to sound, to the point where it can become overwhelming and debilitating. Of particular concern are sudden, unpredictable noises. These can occur at any time during a football match, most notably when goals are scored. The sound levels predicted already exceed the recommended levels for the population living in double-glazed, insulated houses. It is not difficult to imagine how this will affect autistic children in a 200-year-old building. The applicant has paid no attention to this and has, as yet, not proposed any mitigation, perhaps because it would be very difficult. The applicant has stated that it is Forest Green Rovers' ambition to become a championship club. Also that this proposal is for a 10,000-seater stadium, but with only 5,000 for the purposes of this application. By stating this in the covering letter, size is now a material consideration in the planning decision. Well before this ambition is achieved, this stadium will no longer be fit for purpose, and a larger one will be required. This is a strategic matter, and as such, a district-wide search should be conducted now for a site big enough to house, on average, a championship attendance of 17,500. If this proposal is passed, then the Nailsworth Stadium will be demolished, squandering existing resources contrary to MPPF Para 8C, using natural resources prudently and minimise waste, in other words, being green. It has been suggested that the land adjacent to Junction 13 could be more practically used as a training facility for the club and a park and ride for the supporters. It makes no sense to grant permission for a stadium that the applicant himself says is inadequate. Thank you.
Right. David Crofts from the Council for Protection of Rural England. Yep. Again, keep an eye on the clock to make sure that you leave the third person enough time to do theirs. Okay.
Good evening, Chairman. Thank you again for the opportunity to speak. I am an independent planning consultant and member of the Royal Town Planning Institute, once again representing the campaign to protect rural England. CPRE maintains its strong opposition to these proposals. They are very similar to those thoroughly debated and rejected in June. The officer report clearly has a different author. However, it is as deficient as the previous one in its treatment of the crucial test to be applied. It again pays too little regard to the fundamental lack of compliance with the local plan, and then attaches too much importance to the material considerations. The conflict with the local plan could not be clearer, but the claimed benefits of the scheme are insubstantial. In our view, they are nowhere near strong enough to outweigh the conflict with the local plan. The reason for refusal for the previous application referred to several very important local plan policies. The present application is so little different that CPRE considers that all of them continue to apply. The report by Haxbury Generis purports to show that the economic impact on Nailsworth of the club's relocation will be small. We are not convinced, but its major flaw is that it simply assumes that the new stadium will attract 5,000 spectators from the beginning, nearly double the current average of 2,600. It presents no evidence whatever for this. Thus, a report the applicants themselves commissioned undermines their own case. The fundamental principle of the planning system is set out in the second paragraph of the NPPF, that planning applications should be determined in accordance with the development plan unless material considerations indicate otherwise. In conclusion, CPRE believes that this principle and the local plan itself should again be upheld. For this reason, and those that others have put forward, I respectfully ask the committee to refuse planning permission. Thank you.
Thank you. I have Graham Barton, trustee from William Morris College, and you have 3.5 minutes, did you say? You have 3.5 minutes left. I'm afraid the clock stopped working, but well, I'll give you a warning when you get 30 seconds away.
Thank you, Chair. First off, I'd like to say officer enthusiasm in support of this application could not be more evident, and it is, in my view, neither neutral or objective. The application was submitted and validated on the same day, 3rd of July, just 3 weeks to the day from the date of the previous refusal by this committee. And I have to ask why phrases like allow the club to enter into a new era and aim high, what they're doing in a planning report. It's just out of place. The speed at which this application was progressed could also be explained by the fact that it isn't very materially different. The swapping of a natural grass surface for an artificial surface is, in my view, just cynical and disingenuous in an attempt to demonstrate potential additional public benefit to the application. It does not. Even with the addition of the artificial pitch, the facilities of it illustrated will hardly be sufficient for the first team needs, let alone the needs of ladies' teams, academy and youth teams. The all-weather pitch will be fully utilised by FGR demands and as a consequence will inevitably not be available at times whenever the public might want to use it. And like the car parking, it'll only come at a hefty charge. You can't view this facility in the same light as you might a local sports centre. It is a privately run business and access is restricted and exclusive just to the FGR business. No significant, meaningful material change exists between this application and the original, and we would urge you to stick with your original decision. Noise matters. Though noise was not included in the material reasons for refusal of the original application, it is a significant issue in the deliberations. And by introducing additional noise information in support of this new application, the door is now open for noise as an unresolved issue to be discussed and considered. Our genuine concerns regarding the health and well-being of our vulnerable students by having a football stadium supplanted on the green fields next to our campus seem to be continually downplayed, belittled and pooh-poohed by the officers. Noise levels truly do matter. British Standard BS 8233 of 2014 recommend ambient noise levels within buildings to be no more than 35 decibels. Crucial figure. And this is for regular people who do not become distressed by sudden noise sensitivities. Why would this committee or officers knowingly approve a development that will result in William Morris students being exposed to peak noise levels of 50 decibels inside and 70 decibels outside? absolutely outrageous. And this is using the predicted figures produced by FGR, their Hawley consultants, not us. And it's also the standards instituted by the British standards, not ours. No, all we're asking is reason. FGR could mitigate and contain noise they will generate, quite naturally by being successful in football, by altering, amending or adding to the existing design, and without significant detriment to the proposed stadium architectural aesthetic. They could
Can I
engineer...
just tell you you've got 25 seconds left?
Oh, blow. Oh, well, there you go. I would urge you not to, but if you do have a change of mind, if you are minded to approve, you must ensure that noise is dealt with by cast iron conditions and not let this float, because the damage to our children is massive. And the red line area of development should be limited only to the area required by this application, not speculatively to other land.
Okay, thank you. Sorry. Since the clock stopped working, we have now support. We have Dale Vince and Jim Heverin. If you could, Dale, are you going to do yours first? If you could just tell us how long you want to do yours for, and then we can give you a shout when you're 30 seconds away from the end of your slot, so you don't overrun.
Yeah, if I get anywhere near 4 minutes, please give me a wave. I'm hoping to give most of this to Jim, but I heard a lot of stuff here today that I might have to mention. Right, I'll get straight on it. I want to talk firstly about the need that Forest Green Rovers has to move. If you look at our location at the top of Spring Hill, it's a very long, steep, narrow road. It's inconceivable to me that it would ever be given planning consent, a 5,000-seater football stadium in that location, especially if you look at the issues that we face in trying to do it by junction 13 of a motorway. We are running out of power and we're running out of water. We're running at roughly a 3,000 capacity crowd on average, despite what you've heard here tonight. And we have, at big games, we have to bring in a water tanker because the pipe feeding the ground is not big enough. The power pipes similarly are not big enough. And we did look for alternative sites. We spent about 3 years working with Stroud District Council doing exactly that. To call this the easy way out, as the Mayor of Nailsworth did, I think is ridiculous, quite frankly. I also want to talk about the opportunity to the district. This is a world-class piece of architecture. It will be the greenest sports stadium anywhere in the world. There will be a big boost to diversity of the site. We've heard a lot about that, which is incorrect. We'll be planting over 500 new trees, 1.5 kilometres of new hedgerows. There will be a biodiversity boost of 16%. There's a wetland area planned between the canal that we hope will be reinstated and the river. It's also an opportunity for Stroud to host a championship football club, and that will bring significant economic benefit with it. Lastly, I want to just talk about the changes that have been made in the last 6 months since the first application was turned down. We've agreed to move the words to ensure the design of the stadium, that it gets built as designed, into the 106, because it was felt by some members that would provide more protection, so that's done. We've changed one of the grass pitches to 4G to produce community benefit, and that will be available to local football clubs. And an issue that came out yesterday during a Q&A session I think is worth mentioning, because it's been said here tonight that there will be barely any community use because FGR need that pitch itself. We are not intending to use that pitch ourselves at all. The facilities, as they stand on that piece of land, aren't big enough for the combined use of our academy system from ages of 8 to 18, our women's teams, and our first team. So that won't happen. It will be a 4G pitch available to the public, period. Buses, on top of buses from Stroud and Stonehouse, we've added a bus service from Nailsworth and a trial from Cameron Dursley. It's in our interest to bring people in by buses, and we're absolutely for it. By the time we build this, there'll be electric buses, I'm certain of that. Car parking and landscaping is interesting. The model we brought at the last meeting gave a false impression of a sea of concrete. That was never never the intention, so we've detailed that now in a drawing you saw at the start of this meeting. And the biggest change on parking has come from county highways. They forced us to have 1,750 car parking spaces, which members here rightly raised as an objection. It made the scheme look unsustainable and car-centric. That was not our choice at all. They have changed their position since the refusal, and we now have a much more flexible approach to car parking, and I hope that we will have that number down to be just 1/3 of the 1,750. So I welcome that very much. Finally, we commissioned an economic...
Just warn you, Dale, you're coming up to...
All right, thank you. I'll be quick then. We did commission the survey of the economic impact on Nailsworth. As suggested, we've heard the figure of about £250,000 of impact. That is 0.7% of the turnover of the town centre, which is close to £30 million. To suggest that reduction will be catastrophic is ridiculous, and there will be a gain of £1 million to the area around Junction 13, Eastington and Stonehouse from the new development instead. So a fourfold increase in the gain to the district. William Morris House, a lot has been said about that. I want to say it's absolutely wrong to say that we've ignored them and not talked to them. And one thing I think nobody really knows is that we have had students from William Morris House do work experience at FGR for a number of years. I think that's worth me telling you that. It was alleged that Forest Green Rovers have reneged on planning conditions at our current home. The most egregious claim there made by Councillor Kay was around the Mugger, which for 9 years the town council sat on its hands over until such time as houses were built nearby and the planning expired and it was no longer possible to build it. It was never the responsibility of the club to build it. It was our responsibility to provide the land, which we did. So it's just wrong to blame us for that. And finally, capacity. I went to Bournemouth a few months ago. We played them in the Cup. They're in the Premiership. They have a capacity of 10,000 people. Thank you.
Right, you've got 2.5 minutes left out of the 8.
I'll be quick.
I'll give you a shout when you've got 30 seconds left.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Jim Heverin. I'm an architect and director of Zaha Hadid Architects. I'm not local, obviously, but we are very excited to be involved in this project, and I understand the feelings that it seems contradictory to be doing a sustainable development that is new and on a greenfield site. But I think what we should consider are the wider public benefits and how you do new development and what type of indication that sends and how these types, because we are facing a climate emergency, as been touched on several times tonight. And I have worked directly on national programs such as the London 2012 Olympic Games. I worked on the Tokyo 2020 Olympic Stadium. And most recently, I just finished a stadium for Qatar for their World Cup in 2022. And I can say, through my experience, that what's being proposed here is the most sustainable stadium that we have seen. And that is coming forward from a private individual is not the individual, or is not the point. It's the fact that stadiums are places of congregation. They're places of representing communities, and how they are, the values that they represent are important to us as we face this climate change and how we seek to deliver solutions. And I think this will be a landmark development. It will really set a new benchmark in terms of how you can deliver development in a sustainable manner. The stadium itself will be low carbon in terms of its use of timber coming from renewable source, having absorbs carbon, obviously, as it is growing.
You've got 30 seconds left.
30 seconds. So I think that stature is something that really needs to be considered, and also the fact that proportion in terms of how we consider stadiums. They're used about 30 days of the year. The rest is this the way this is situated in a parkland actually increases public access to nature and the nature experience. And I think that... Look at the plans.
So, okay.
At the moment, you've restricted paths.
Could you please not interrupt the speaker?
You have restricted paths. What we have...
I'm afraid you have run up to the end of your time now, I'm afraid. As you were interrupted, you were just coming up to the time, I'm afraid.
Okay, well, my point is... Can I finish the point?
No, we decided we were going to have to be very strict tonight because we had so many speakers. Sorry about that. Really doesn't help proceedings when people interrupt. If you could try not to, it would be great. Thanks. Right, we now move on to questions to officers. If members could please indicate which officer you wish to answer your question, the case officer or highways representative, whatever.
And we have the noise consultant as well.
Oh, and the noise. Yes, our noise consultant is also here. At the beginning, yeah. That's all, isn't it? Yeah. Okay. Any questions from members? Oh, topics. Yes, of course. We have a list of, as we did in the first meeting, we have a list. We didn't hand these out, did we? So, okay, I'll read them out. A list of key topics, and then if anybody could think of any topics we've missed, you can ask about those at the end. So we thought the best thing would be, again, if we went through the topics. There's policy, local plan / NDP, Nailsworth, economic impact, noise, neighbour amenities, community use access, highways, landscaping, heritage, design, ecology, and then any other questions. So we're going to kick off with policy, local plan / NDP. Sorry, I'll go through them a bit more slowly so you can write them down. Policy, local plan, NDP. Okay. Nailsworth, economic impact. Noise / neighbour amenities. Community use / access. I assume that's access to facilities rather than access for cars. Highways, which is access for cars. Landscaping. Heritage. Obviously that's impact on heritage assets around. Design. Obviously of the stadium itself. Ecology. And then any other questions that we might, on topics we might have missed. Okay. Right. So we'll start with questions on policy, local plan, NDP. Councillor Cooper.
I think this is the only category I can ask this question on. You did mention at the beginning that this was possibly going to be the subject of a call into the Secretary of State. Can you just expand a bit more, because I wasn't aware of this sort of thing, who actually triggers that, or triggered it, or requested it, or whatever, please?
Yes, Eastington Parish have asked the Secretary of State, is dealt with by his planning unit. They've asked the Secretary of State to consider whether he wants to call in this application. What that means is we can make a decision tonight, or we make a resolution, and then we have to allow 21 days for the Secretary of State to consider whether or not he wants to recover the decision back to him. So they'll decide that after tonight.
Councillor Williams.
Crack the technology anyway. This site and the site south of the 419 are both, I believe, in our the current version of our draft local plan. Does that fact in and of itself carry any weight whatsoever in the discussions we're having tonight?
Chair, if I may answer that. The document that's out for consultation at the present time is informal, so it doesn't carry weight. However, it does indicate the Council's preferred strategy. So on that basis, it is of interest, but it does not carry any weight at this stage at the moment.
Councillor Jones.
Could I just have a bit of clarity on what you just said, Geraldine, because the plan at the moment is out to consultation and it is by no means agreed by all members on all aspects of that of the local plan. So can you just clarify, because you seem to suggest that it's our preferred strategy. It's not, it's just a draft.
Well, it is a draft, but obviously it is a draft which has gone through Environment Committee, and it is a draft for consultation. So it contains elements within it which may move forward into council policy in the long term. So clearly it isn't in this particular instance, it's not a site that has been disregarded at an early stage. Had it been this allocation, had it been, it wouldn't have appeared in the consultation draft. But as I would repeat, that is not to say that it has any weight, because in the consideration of it in relation to the local plan, it has no weight at this stage.
Councillor Lydon. Yeah, could all members try taking your cards out and putting them back in again to see if that helps?
Yeah, it works now. Yeah, I just wanted to check on the role and function of this committee, because I think it's important members of the public appeal watch us on webcasts, and I know we all treat these things with gravity. But am I right that we here as elected members of this committee, our role here tonight is A, not to take political advice and actually be whipped or actually recognise that we're members of various parties? That's right, isn't it? Secondly, we come here with an unbiased view, that we read the papers and we do not make public declarations before the meeting of for or against. And thirdly, we're here as Stroud District Councillors, not as me, Steve, doing my best for Leonard Stanley, Jenny just thinking about the interests of King's Cross. So it's our job, when we actually hear the evidence presented to us, particularly by your good selves, i.e. as the officers, we form a judgment on the weight of that material consideration versus the balance versus national policy guidance and local policy guidance. Is that a fair summary? And in terms of last meeting, I'm told that there is an appeal coming up. And in terms of the reasons, and many people here tonight have actually said, oh, it's not changed from last time. I re-watched the webcast the other day, and I think we probably spent, during that meeting, at least a quarter of an hour after it was rejected, to actually come up with some reasons, collectively by the people who opposed this bid, to actually turn it down. Is that right?
That was part of the process, yes.
Okay. And my last question is, you as officers and all the statutory consultees recommended this last time for acceptance, yep?
Correct.
And tonight, you're also doing the same? Okay. And my very, very last question, if this is likely to go to appeal, the guidance of the appeal inspector would be very much in line to accept the recommendations of all those professional bodies, rather than the words of us as relatively lay people.
Certainly, at appeal, the fact that the proposal, whatever proposal it would be, at whatever appeal, had a favourable recommendation from officers, may well have some influence, yes. On the basis that the officer report, as I believe this one does, attempts to look at each of the issues and gives a balanced view on each of those issues. So it provides a basis for the officer recommendation.
Right, I should have said at the beginning we were trying to stick to 3 questions per person. No, that's fine, complicated issue, needed a number of questions, but in general, if you could try to stick to no more than 3 questions per person to start with, to allow others to come in. You can always come back and ask more later on, just trying to get everybody in when there's a lot of people asking questions, which there haven't been on this one. Fine, Steve, yeah, complicated issue, a lot of questions you wanted to put. Okay, no more questions on policy, local plan NDP, definitely. Yes, Councillor Jones.
just to be clear for people that may or may not be watching, can you confirm the weight that's given to the NDP? Because I know it's very important to a lot of communities. We work by the local plan, but the NDP is also significant. Could you just say that, please?
Yes, the NDP was adopted in 2016 and is part of the development plan, so it's read in conjunction with the local plan.
Okay, no more questions on that. Then we move on to Nailsworth economic impact. Anybody want to ask a question? Jenny? Who else had their hands up?
May I ask if, when you were calculating the effect of Forest Green Rovers moving from Nailsworth, the economic effect of the housing that may go there is included within that calculation?
Yes, that does include the impact of they're proposing about 80 houses on the existing site, so that is included in the impact.
Okay, Councillor Reid.
Can you hear me now? Yeah, thank you. I think this is questions for John, I think. I've got a couple of questions in relationship to points 266 down to 268 regarding methods and processes of methodologies used to find sources of information. And I noticed that the fan survey context is there quite clearly, and I'm wondering what other methods were used when the applicant gained information regarding the removal and the economic impact on Nailsworth. And has the applicant consulted with the Town Council and Chamber of Trade, for instance, to discuss potential projects in the future that could replace the economic footprint that may go?
Yeah, the economic study the applicant has done, it takes its data from a range of sources. There's the fan survey. They've also used ONS data, business registers, employment surveys. They've also used Stroud District Council data as well, our town centre and retail study. So there's a range of different sources that they've used to assess what impact it will have. I know that the club is involved in the town, but I'm not sure it's necessarily for them to propose other schemes. But what the scheme does do is still provides a link with Nailsworth. So we've got the transport link as well. So the buses will run, the shuttle buses will run from Nailsworth. So there is still a link from that part of the district through to the new site proposed in the scheme.
Okay, any more questions on Nailsworth economic impact? Everybody done? Yep. Okay, move on to noise, neighbourhood amenities. Anybody want to ask a question? Yes, Councillor Jones.
The noise is obviously a very important factor in this, and a number of mentions are made, including the conditions of the mitigation measures that will be potentially employed. As we've got a noise expert here, could you give us an indication on what those mitigation measures might be?
There we go. Yes, so there is still a variety of measures that could be used, which is why we're specifying what the internal levels need to be rather than how they need to be achieved. There are still design measures that could be incorporated into the actual design of the stadium. Maybe I should start by saying they need to achieve about a 10 to 15 dB reduction at William Morris House to achieve the condition, and we're talking about these LMAX levels, so these instantaneous noise levels. To achieve that, there are a variety of ways that they can do it. It could be through design actually of the stadium itself. It could do with management, so it could be how they use the stadium and also some of the other ancillary uses, certainly the ones towards William Morris House in terms of the car park. It could be, there could still be an option of, there would need to be additional planning application for it, but there could be barriers on their site as well. However, the easiest way to deal with it would be to enter into negotiations with William Morris House and find a solution that works both ways. But either way, the condition is worded so that they have to achieve the satisfactory level on the inside well, the qualification is teaching and living areas, if that helps.
Thank you, Chair. A little bit, but it's not that clear, really. Is there some sort of physical mechanism you can explain? I mean, the stadium is 19.54 metres high, I think, or limited to that, and the design of it is an important part of the application because many people, myself included, think it is a beautiful design. So how would you, what physical mechanisms would you use to influence that noise? And you mentioned, I think this might be my third question, you mentioned that one of the options would be to negotiate with William Morris House. Does that mean, you know, fitting triple glazing or something like that? Is that the sort of thing you're considering?
Yeah, so on the design element, that would be up to the applicant to find those solutions. I suspect that the solutions could be any number of those three different options. So it could be design measures, which may, you know, maybe small things that would not be seen from the outside that would contain the noise. You know, that would have to be something that would have to be looked at if other solutions weren't available to them. So I would probably say that would be their last resort. In terms of what works could be undertaken to William Morris House, yes, there could be ventilation and glazing, if that was acceptable, and solution provided there that was going to work. It could be any number of ways of addressing the situation in terms of what rooms are used for what sensitive purposes, and coming up with a solution there. So from a council point of view, we want to make sure that we're not restricting any of those options that are available to the applicant. So any of those, there is no one solution. Like I say, the easiest one would be to enter into negotiations from a practicality point of view and cost, but it's not the only solution.
Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Chair. I thought I nearly had my head round this at the last time we looked at this, and now decided I haven't at all. If we reduce the noise level that's inside William Morris House by 10 to 15 decibels, I think was what you said, does that then meet William Morris House requirements, or is that somebody else's view of what would be adequate?
Okay, so the level that we've come up with in the condition is 40 dB LA max. That's 5 dB lower than the 45 dB LA max from the standard that was mentioned earlier, BS 8223. The 5 dB reduction is justifiable from some other standards that look at special needs schools, and how that's a reduction that is appropriate for a special needs school. So it's acknowledging that there's an increased sensitivity here, and reducing that requirement. Now that requirement is day and night. So the 45 dB that is used for normal dwellings is just applied during the night, whereas what we're doing is saying that this is a sensitive space throughout the day and the night.
Okay, let's try firming that up a little bit, if I may. Can you show me any statement from an authoritative source who actually understands the issues of autism that this 40 decibel level is okay, or have we simply arrived at a bit of a reduction in the hope that it'll be all right? But have we got some independent authority telling us that that'll be okay?
So the only government guidance on the matter is this BB93, which is the guidance for schools. I've been involved in designing schools for special educational needs, including autism myself, and have a lot of experience with that side. So I'm confident that this is the right level. However, each individual child is different, and we have to each need is different, and there's always going to be some sensitivity and some that are less sensitive. But I feel that this is the right level to work to. But in answer to the question, there is no other guidance on this.
Councillor Clifton.
Thank you. It won't only be the residents, pupils at William Morris House that will be affected by noise. So it's all very well working out some plan with William Morris House, but how realistic is it that the noise levels can be reduced, the noise levels emanating from the stadium into the surrounding area can be reduced, that aren't just specific to William Morris House?
Yes, so those the noise levels to the surrounding residents have been assessed. There's no doubt that it will be audible, and that there is limited control over noise during those sort of crowd cheer events. We can only say that they've taken reasonable steps to make sure that it's best practice, but that doesn't, and they meet the requirements for noise levels in residential properties. So we do have quite a well-established standard for that, and those are met. But that does not mean that it will not be audible. So that has to be part of the balance.
So
can I jump in as well? There are other controls as well. We've limited the number of occasions it will happen, and also the hours as well. So those controls will help the sort of other residents as well.
So can you give us a clue as to the level of noise that might be expected on those particular?
Yes, I mean the levels have been provided through the model that's been updated, and they're around 60 dB. So to try and put that into context, that's if you were standing quite close to an HGV passing on the road. So it's difficult to try. It's a different noise from an HGV. I totally understand that. So we have to be careful with the perception. But in those sorts of levels, it would be noticeable. That's during this worst case crowd cheer in terms of noise levels. The average noise levels, as we've heard, don't significantly change, but to be honest, that's not really, I think, the significant issue here is those instantaneous noise that people will hear.
Councillor Binns.
Thanks, Chair. You mentioned the fact that there could be a physical barrier or a wall, which would be one of the solutions for the noise levels. Could you suggest what that would look like and possibly where it might be sited as well? Obviously, this is a conservation area.
Yes, like I say, that would have to be subject to additional application, but it is one of the possible ways to reduce the noise level. You would either have that close to the source, so somewhere close to the stadium, and particularly if we're looking at other noises like the parking area, having a barrier around there, or you would have it as close to the school as possible. So that would have to be, again, looked at as a completely separate application. But that's just one. It is one of the solutions, and it could be a bund, could be a 3 or 4 metre high bund. That will be less effective than design measures or dealing specifically with the school. So again, that wouldn't be the preferred option, I wouldn't expect.
So this sort of open plan, sort of countryside setting could have a 4 metre high noise bund in, or something similar. You're saying that's one of the possibilities. So you wouldn't have this open vista.
That's not what's been applied for here, but But that would be one solution.
And if the size of the stadium increases from the application at the moment to, let's say, 10,000 or 15,000, what would the increase in the noise levels then be? Would it be twofold, threefold?
It's unlikely to have a significant change, to be honest, in noise levels, because we look at noise levels in two different ways. One is this LMAX, which is the maximum noise from a cheer, and that's going to be the same, really, no matter on the number of people. I mean, how good the goal is. It's a strange thing, but in absolute noise terms levels, that's not going to make a lot of difference in terms of the number of people. The thing that would change would be the ancillary noise from people coming and going, the number of vehicles, how far south the number of the vehicles are using the car park and things like that, and how close they're getting to other residents. So it wouldn't be, in numerical terms, a significant change. But there would still be some effects, if that makes sense. At the end of the day, the biggest control is on the time of use and the hours of use, because we're trying to avoid sleep disturbance at neighbouring properties, so that control would remain.
May I just add that obviously the application is for a 5,000 stadium. Should there be any increase in that, then that would require a fresh application, and all of these issues would have to be reconsidered, reinvestigated, and who knows what the overall opinion might be to increase it. So I think it's important to make that clear, that any increase over 5,000 would be an application in its own right.
Any question? No? Councillor Lydon.
In terms of when we look at other applications, I'm glad you reiterated that, Jerry. If, for example, we look at a supermarket application, we look at what their proposal is, and then we make a decision based on what the proposal is. I didn't think we were allowed to say, well, hang on, we know we're going to come in for double the size in 10 years' time, and therefore we better include that in that discussion. So thank you for clarifying that. Mine is more about the condition to do with the noise. On other applications as well, we condition them, and I think many of us, to be frank, have got a bit peeved off coming to walk around West Estonis on numerous wet Tuesdays to look at various fields and gates and be told that's where there'll be a facility, etc. But I do actually agree there's a lot of merit in that, because it actually does mean that we actually do have a further say on a stage by stage of critical developments, in that case the footpaths where the school's going to go, etc. So is it possible for us to condition this, if we are minded to approve, that in itself, in terms of the mitigation strategy, or whatever the technical term is, that is being brought forward by the applicant, is A, brought into the full application stage, and then if it is granted full stage, during that period, we can actually ask for that to be called back here and brought back here for regular reporting, and actually approve it on a stage-by-stage basis. Sorry, is that
I think it's a more procedural point.
I'm looking at my colleague Craig. The scheme of delegation, as it stands at the present time, suggests that technical applications are not applications which should be considered by this committee, because they are of a technical nature, not subjective. However, we would require, if the condition remains as it is, and if permission was granted, we would require what we call a discharge of condition application. And I'm just looking for Steve Craig. And
if you give me a couple of seconds, I will come back to you on that.
So it really comes down, in my opinion, subject to what Craig says, as to whether or not that discharge of condition application, when it's submitted, is a technical issue and not a subjective one. If a discharge of condition had a number of range of options, I would suggest to you that it was appropriate to come back to this committee. However, the normal way that these conditions are dealt with are that they decide one scheme and then they submit that to us.
Yeah, I mean, Geraldine's correct. It's the scheme of delegation is quite clear that the exceptions to the delegation don't include. Basically, it says may not be referred to a committee pursuant to this appendix, if it concerns a matter of technical appraisal, so if it was deemed that that was a matter of technical appraisal, then no, it wouldn't be available to be brought back.
Detail here, but surely if the principle, though, is right, and if our colleague, I can't see your name, mate, I'm sorry, Nigel, he has suggested that we hope there'll be, if it is approved, further discussion, etc., and it might be a different number of ways forward. And of course, we haven't mentioned that cost ought to be a variable in this as well. It's interesting enough we haven't mentioned cost tonight, and in fact, how and who this is being funded, it's not coming out of the public purse, etc., etc. That has to obviously be a factor. But if there was, say, a menu put forward of different options and buns and all this sort of stuff, then that wouldn't necessarily be a technical one, would it? That would be allow us to have some input into it, or at least to hear your recommendation. Well, actually looking at A versus B versus C versus D against these various factors, I'm happy to say that's the one, and at least then we're assured, as in theory the representative voice on behalf of the whole district, that we're happy with the way forward, based on a 5,000-seater application with all the noise and all the other things that we've already, which will have been accepted.
Chair, if I may, just following on, sorry, from the conversation that we just had, obviously some of the possible options that Nigel has discussed tonight are physical options, and those are the options which don't involve William Morris House itself. But if there were physical options that were to do with the design of the building and indeed development within the grounds of the building, which is the subject of the application, then that would come back to members because that would be part of the reserved matters. But the only possible scheme which wouldn't be available to you would be if there was some agreement with William Morris College, sorry, I apologise, itself, because that falls outside of the application side.
Sorry, yep. Okay, Councillor Tomlin.
Thank you, Chair. Condition 13 details the times that the football matches can be held within, and also the ancillary use within the stadium building between, I understand it's been amended to 7 a.m. to 1 a.m. And obviously on match days 9 a.m. to 11 p.m. Does this time frame include the time it takes to clear the fans in the car park? That's my first question.
Do you want to take that one? Or
Yeah, the condition is, it says they're the hours that the site is open to the public, so I would say it would include that.
Could you just clarify that, please? Because the wording is, the stadium hereby approved shall not hold football matches outside the hours of 9 a.m. to 11 p.m. Is that the time that the match is able to finish and then consequential clearance of the car park, or...?
Chair, I think it's a very good point. The intention of that condition is that those are the hours, as John mentioned, that the stadium site would be open to the public on football match days. So we can certainly, should members wish, clarify that within the wording of the condition. The second part of the condition does actually refer to the site being open to members of the public, so as John mentioned, but we can certainly clarify that in respect of the first sentence of that condition.
Thank you. And just further to that, the hours of 7 a.m. to 1 a.m. Monday to Saturday for the ancillary use within the stadium. Again, presumably at 1 a.m. this is suggesting that there will be movements of cars disturbing the sleep. The reason for this condition is to prevent noise and disturbance to residential properties in the locality, in accordance with the various policies. Presumably at 1 a.m. most local residents are likely to be asleep. Could you just detail again the restriction on the clearing of the car park and the traffic at that time?
Yeah, that's a typo. It should be 1 p.m. So it will be from 7 in the morning till 1 p.m.
Thank you.
That's right, isn't it?
Yeah.
Some clarity. Who here knows and understands what time a football match might finish? And the reality is, if it's an 8 o'clock kick-off, it's 2:45 minutes plus half-time, which has now gone up to about a quarter of an hour, plus there might be extra time, plus there might be penalties. So sometimes you can be there till quarter past, 20 past, half past 10. And if they're in the Champions League, of course, and etc., and it's going to be broadcast all over the world, it may go on later. I mean, I just think I accept all the standards, but we've got a sense of reality here. I mean, I live in a village where people ride roughshod over any of this stuff, and then we actually have to come back and rely on people actually enforcement. But I think we need to just ensure on these things that we actually apply the real world stuff.
Okay, I think we're getting into debate-ish territory. Was there actually a question there for an
My
officer?
question is, can we ensure on things like this, if those sort of occasions happen, and we have got some there is some leeway can be given? Because obviously, if that was a local business, well, actually, you can't play in X or Y competition, because if the rules have been changed by then, and it may well necessitate that it's going to go on at least till 10:30, quarter to 11, then because of our local planning regime, we're probably, you can't have the match then.
Okay.
So just asking, have we got the ability to apply some discretion? That's all I'm asking.
And I'm not sure whether officers will be able to.
Councillor Iden, if you look at the final half sentence of condition 13, it does say unless otherwise approved by the LPA. So that's the discretion you're asking about.
Councillor Williams.
I think it has been mostly answered, but it was really a follow-on from the question on sound attenuation, if you like, that it's difficult to imagine many solutions which wouldn't require something that was tangible and visible, and in that case, anything of that sort could be brought back to committee, and I think it would be a good idea, even if there wasn't a choice, even if it was a single proposal, if you can see it, touch it, feel it, that we ask that it come back.
Right, yeah, I think that was pretty much what Jerry was saying, if it's a physical change then. Right, okay. Do you want... Sorry, I think that's been taken on board. Oh, okay, good.
Yeah, just to clarify, on the hours, it isn't meant to be 1 a.m, but it isn't meant to be 1 p.m. So I think what it should be is, it should be 11 p.m. So that means the ancillary uses, so that's like the gym and the conference facilities, can open at 7 in the morning and close at 11 at night on Monday to Saturday. And then on Sunday, they can open at 10 and close at 11. So it won't be open till 1 in the morning. Hope that clarifies that one.
Councillor Williams, do you have any more questions? No. In which case, we move on to Councillor Jones.
Thank you, Chair. Could you just explain if there's a difference between, you said the 40 dB you want to get down, is there any difference between day rooms and bedrooms? Does the requirement, does it have to be quieter in bedrooms?
So the proposed wording of the condition is sensitive teaching and living spaces. So we're envisioning that to mean that could be bedrooms, because although the control is at 11 o'clock at night, it's envisaged that they could be using bedrooms a lot earlier. That would apply to teaching spaces as well. So that's how we're trying to control that the noise coming in is for those sensitive spaces. Does that make? Sorry, does that answer?
Only through a different planning application I was dealing with, I thought bedrooms had to be quieter.
So the control for, so if it was a residential application, the control is for bedrooms at night from 11 till 7 in the morning, and that's that 45 dB. There are other controls for daytime levels for living rooms, but that's on the average level of 30 dB, but that's as an average over the whole 18 hours.
No, I'm sorry, we can't take questions from the public. It's only for committee members. No, I'm sorry, we can't. We're not allowed to. Okay, if we all finish with questions on noise, neighbour amenities, in which case we move on to community. Sorry, go on, Diane.
Does that also include then the gardens? What would you class a garden as? Is that an educational space? Is that a restful space? And what are the noise levels supposed to be for that, please?
So we did take quite a careful look at the use of William Morris College, and the noise is really affecting that the sort of northeast area, and our understanding is that the external areas there are more for car parking and not teaching spaces. The teaching spaces are on the south west side of the school, where they've got some garden areas and things like that. So that's why we've tried to use that wording there for teaching spaces. But strictly speaking, if there was to become a teaching space on the north east side of the buildings, then I would interpret this condition as meaning that needed to be provided as well.
Councillor Jones.
Thank you for your indulgence, Chair. I apologise. But whilst we're talking on noise, Ecotricity provided a map, which I can't find at the moment, of the audio impact on the surrounding property. Someone mentioned Great Albury earlier on. Have you got a measure on what the noise levels are anticipated to be there? We've concentrated rightly on William Morris House, but have you got an idea of what they're likely to be, and with regard to these cheers and what have you?
Yes, so the one that I've been looking at is in Appendix 2. I don't know if we want to try and bring that up. So that's the one. It looks funny colours, but I think that's the same one. Let me just check. Looks different. Yeah, no, so that's the same one that I'm looking at. So this is the LMAX levels predicted. So this is the crowd cheer. That's what we're talking about, and you can see how the noise will spill out. And if you look at some of the levels, say in the West End, at the West End properties, this is where I said it will be audible. And in the region of around 60 dB. You have to remember that these are free-filled, which basically means external levels on their own without any sort of windows or anything in the way. So it will definitely be audible. So you can see there the properties that will be affected by the crowd cheer noise. It has to be given in the context that there are other things that you would hear in a similar sort of level. So if you had, I'm only using this as just to try and context, but if you had an HGV moving along the road through West End, you would get a fairly similar sort of set of levels. But obviously it's a different subjective noise.
Thank you, Chair. With regard to Greater Albury, it looks like there's crowd cheer levels of 55 to 60 dB, maybe 60 to 65 for some of them. Is it right that I think the noise level normally during the day is 50 dB, which you can go to 55 as a constant?
Okay, so we just have to be careful here to compare like with like. So these LMAX levels, the only criteria for those is 45 on the inside of bedrooms at night. When we're looking at LAQ, which is the other plan, perhaps we can bring the other plan up. So that, let me just check. Sorry, we just need the titles on these. Yep, that's the LAQ. So here, these are the levels that are compared to what you said about the 50 to 55. And so you've got there, the 50 to 55 band is the blue. And so you can see that it's, and normally that would apply to private amenity spaces. So they would be the rear gardens that would be considered to be the sensitive space, and it doesn't really affect them in the private amenity space, and that's the bit that we're concerned about.
Right. Any more questions on noise, neighbourhood communities? In which case we can move on to community use, community access. Any questions on that topic? No. Okay. Highways. Sorry, go on. Sorry, Steve.
At the last meeting, and certainly as part of this strategy, did we not recognise, or at least all of us note, that the club does a superb job in terms of all the work it does with young people, etc., etc., and these facilities would actually enhance that? Sorry, I thought that was we actually accepted that last time.
Yeah, the club does do lots of sort of outreach stuff. They've got an ambassadors scheme, so they go into local schools on the fitness side. There's also a lot on sort of health and healthy eating, all those sort of things. The new stadium will also allow more of a sort of an eco side. They do tours at the moment of the existing stadium, but obviously the new one will greatly increase the options and possibilities for that sort of thing. So yeah, the club does lots of, I don't know if you call it outreach, but community-based stuff beyond just football.
Councillor Jones and then Doyner. Sorry, Dorcas.
Sorry, Chair. Councillor Norman Kay said earlier on that there are some challenges in actually being able to get to use the facilities at New Lawn. Could you perhaps, John, comment on that? And it's mentioned that this access to this artificial pitch would be available to the community. If it was to be granted permission, is it possible to condition things like that to make sure that it was enforceable?
We are looking to control or provide that. So we've got in the conditions, and also the legal agreement will have that community access as well. So there's the sort of controls provided so that does come forward.
Councillor Binns.
Just going on from that, please. So how can you condition that, please? That's, let's say in a year's time, if planning permission is granted, that Forest Green Rovers then can't renege on the condition and say, well, actually, we didn't have any, there weren't any people from the community coming forward, therefore we will bring it in-house. Can we condition that in black and white, and so it's impossible to breach?
The condition is to agree a community access, so they'll then submit to us the details of what, when and how, and then we'll approve if we're happy with it, and then it would be our normal enforcement process of if they breach it, we'd be asking questions why and can take all our normal action to make sure that it does happen.
But following on from what I think it was Councillor Kay said, we know that Forest Green shut their facilities for the community up at the New Lawn, in terms of, I think, the gym's gone and the access to computers and all sorts of other things. So, okay, that's a statement. So that I won't proceed. It was just the fact that Forest Green have already reneged on the contract that they had with the community at New Lawn. I'm just concerned that it will happen again with this application.
That's not a question. Yeah, I know. Yeah, just agreeing with you. Self-realisation was there. Okay. Any more questions on the community use access, or can we move on to highways? Yep. Sorry, Councillor William.
Are we on parking? Parking under highways?
I think we're still doing community use access, but I'm going to move on to highways now, if that's okay with everybody. Okay. Right. Moving on to highways. Any questions on highways issues? Councillor Cooper.
Yes. One of the benefits of the revised application, I believe, is that the reduction in the number of parking places. Are they actually going to disappear, or will they still be there but not in use? Because obviously if it's successful, presumably they might have to be brought back into use. So have you had any more information on that, please?
Yeah, what we're looking to do with the revised conditions is provide a more sort of managed and flexible approach to parking. It's got a review process in it as well, so the idea is you start off with a core amount of parking and see what the demand is and link that in with the other sustainable transport modes, and then we can review how it's going, and if it's causing other issues or other problems, they can bring forward other areas of the site. So it's a reactive and flexible approach to try and address the concern that we're providing loads of spaces and not encouraging like the bus transport.
You okay with that, or do you want more clarification from the highways representative?
No, I'm okay with that. I think my next question would have been a debate question, so I won't ask it.
Okay. Right. Councillor Miles? Yeah.
May I ask the officer, would these revised parking conditions mean that there was less view of the parked cars from outside views?
Yeah, the master plan we've got there and the landscape strategy, the aim of that is to break it up into zones. So you can see the small pictures in the corner. They provide more trees and sort of softer, greener, so that the areas that aren't used as much would have the sort of grass, reinforced grass finish, and the trees in them. So what that does is it softens the appearance of cars and helps break up the uniformity and the regimented nature of parked cars. But the whole idea of the parking strategy is to discourage private cars. We've got a bus strategy and a car park management strategy and a travel plan. There's lots of different areas we're going at it to try and encourage the sustainable transport. So we've got the cycling, the buses, and even walking as well. So it's not just one element, they all link in to try and improve the appearance and the sustainability of the whole site.
Thank you.
Councillor Lydon?
It's really a question to our county colleague. When you look at what's been proposed here against the current operation at the new lawn, do you actually look at things like the capacity of the dual carriageway known as Tinkley Lane and the effect of people coming through the massive village of Nimsfield, and the fact that on match days there's never any consideration, there's never any problems with this, and the fact that people are trying to get up and to the club from Stroud and get up the hill, and there's no inconvenience at all, of course, to the current residents of High Arkle and around there, caused on current match days. Are those no factors? I can give you anecdotal evidence. As a regular attender at Nimsfield for about 4 years, it was regularly on the agenda there that Tinkley Lane is completely out of order, and in fact they used to try and get me to try and even stop the tractors going down it, even though there was a farm halfway down. So I do wonder at times, my question is, we need to look at these in an objective fashion. We are talking about a brand new site here, slap bang next to a motorway, compared to people trying to angle their way down an old country lane, which, to say the least, has got a few parking spaces with people bundling to the edge. Or is that a completely unfair question to you?
All questions are fair. The quality of the answer might be where you feel there might be a follow-up. In terms of the planning administration, and what we have to consider is the site that's in front of us and not the loss of the site that's going to go away or the impacts that it has, and we don't try to balance up the pain that that might create against the pain that this might create. We just have to, in planning terms, consider this site, and if we feel that it can be mitigated appropriately, administer that statutory consultee response to the planning authority so the planning case officer can make their recommendation. So whatever the existing site is doing, we are not concerned about, because we didn't have to consider that as this application. We considered this site and what would have to be the appropriate response in highways terms to essentially make it work.
Sorry, Councillor Williams.
Thanks. On calculating the parking requirements, at one extreme, memory serves, and I haven't got the figures here, the Gloucestershire Highways number would be, I think, 1 parking space per 15 seats, which gives you 333, does it, car park spaces? The only national sort of government figures I could find for car occupancy suggested that, I think for leisure, I think was the nearest or the only vaguely appropriate category, suggested something like 1.7 people per car and nothing over two people per car, which on say a 5,000 crowd, 4,000 coming by car, would give you a car parking requirement of somewhere between 2,000 and 2,500. So somewhere in between 333 and 2,500 is the number of cars who are going to turn up on a big match day. Can you explain to me what sort of calculations and assumptions you used to arrive at what you've arrived at?
Yes, parking standards are obviously a steer. They're not kind of de facto correct for each and every use, and football stadiums are somewhat niche in their measure, what they do and how they get people to come to them. The outcome of putting something next to a motorway would be the automatic assessment that you would be encouraging private car use, and that more people might arrive by private car. Well, we've restrained that position by saying we're going to accept less parking to start with. We're going to make the applicant pay close attention to the activity on the local streets. We're going to make them responsible from their charging levy, if they charge for the parking, for any resilience that's needed on our local roads, which are not all fully built yet on Stonehouse. So as and when, if those started to have an impact on them, we would go back through those conditions via the planning case officer and use that authority to get those matters resolved. But in terms of the overall parking numbers, it's really what we want it to be to make it work the way that we want it to work. So if we provided 2,500 car parking spaces, I can be pretty sure it will be full with 2,500 cars, because it will seem like the way to come here is by car. But that's not the methodology that we've taken. We've sought the improvement in the offer to the bus services. We've taken the advice from Stagecoach, who have an interest in providing better local services here. We've identified, for example, in Gloucester there are 1,000 residual parking opportunities at any match time period, and that you could take the train down to Stonehouse and then take the match day bus. There are many different ways to think about getting to this location than by driving. But if we provided lots and lots of parking, you're going to think driving is the right way to do it. So there isn't a particular standard. We've taken advice from KPMG reports. We've taken my personal experience from working on Lords and Earls Court during the Olympics and the Emirates Stadium. We've taken my team leader's knowledge from working on Charlton and Greenwich. And we've come to the conclusion that the last response of the Highway Authority was very accepting of the potential for car traffic, but we thought that that was an outcome which we didn't have to accept, that we could be resilient to it, and so we've set our own parking requirement with a parking management strategy. It's quite a long, windy answer, but I hope it's gotten you to where you need to be.
Okay. Any more questions? Councillor Jones.
Just following on from that, and you might have partly answered it in your response. I appreciate there's this tension between providing unlimited parking and trying to limit the amount of people driving their car there. Would you anticipate, even if it's only in the short term, that if you limit the parking, then there would be an inevitable impact on the surrounding roads, despite the fact that you were suggesting that you're going to make the applicant responsible for that?
Inevitable it's an interesting word, isn't it? Because it's that acceptance that that's going to be the outcome, and that's the one that we want. it's not the outcome that we want. So if there was justified by the applicant and they submitted evidence to us which was we're running a really good travel plan, we're running a really good event management strategy, but simply put we've got 200 extra car arrivals and we've only got 400 parking spaces currently, this will address itself if we had 600 parking spaces, then that would be the accepted position. We have been absolutely clear with this round of administration that we are not going to let our residents and the new roads, which have not been constructed yet, take the additional parking pain that could be an outcome without these conditions in place. So the conditions are protective, not for the stadium, but for the residents of the local area, who, some of which have not moved here yet.
Councillor Williams.
Can I just come back? You see, that the difficulty I have with this is that what you're saying is very sensible, and I'm sure would work if we were looking at what was entirely a local, or more or less entirely a local facility. You know, if you're building Cribbs Causeway or something, you know where your people are going to come from, you can model it, you've got a good idea. The worst match I've been to for traffic this season so far has been Plymouth, and Plymouth, we're a local match for Plymouth, and it was fairly chaotic because a lot of people turned up in their cars from Plymouth. Now I would guess that most of them didn't know when they left Plymouth where they were going to park or what some of them will have been on the website and seen there's a park and ride, judging by the numbers parked on the streets. They hadn't taken any notice of it, even if they'd looked it up. So that's my concern with this, that you get a lot of people coming who don't know the layout, who don't know where to go. And are you allowing for the fact that you've got to deal with that sort of situation, rather than one where over time people will learn it and they'll sort themselves out, and, like we all do, you know where you can park when you go to so-and-so. But it seems to me to be different, and you don't seem to be allowing for it.
Sure. We have allowed for it. We took two different assessments. We took assessment of away fans and we took assessment of home fans, because away fans are very different. They're not from here, are they? They're coming for a match. There's far fewer of them by ticket numbers, but they make up a proportion of that. We took a very different approach with assessing them. Now, I can't really speak on behalf of the applicant except to say that when we take their travel plan, when they seek to discharge that by condition, we will be looking at away travel as well, and be telling them that when they sell tickets to away supporters, they have to tell them what their travel options are, and that they need to make use of alternatives to parking, and that there's a limited amount of parking available on the site. So if we end up with the possibility of more away day supporters arriving by car than the parking is available, there won't be anywhere for them to park, because we'll have gone through the round of administration to address the protocols on the local roads, the changes that will be needed in parking terms. If, and this is an if, but if eventually the only acceptable outcome was match day controls on local roads, we would promote that, and we would make the applicant put that through as part of their car parking strategy. But it's fair to not assume the worst and to put those things in place before they are necessary, and to give the applicant every opportunity to make their travel plan, which is an acceptable mitigation in planning terms, work. So in terms of away supporters, they will be directed to not try to come here by private car, because there will be very few parking opportunities for them on site, and the local roads will not be available to them.
Okay, any more questions? Yes, Councillor Tomlin.
Thank you, Chair. I just would like to ask a question. Your previous answer, Chris, was that the parking provision was to protect the local residents. Obviously, I think we all know that if people are required to pay for a car park space, which I understand this is going to be paid for, that they will seek free parking elsewhere. So could you just clarify how you can protect the residents, because that I know was discussed over the last meeting, both on the new residential site opposite and also the road adjacent to the site. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, Grove Lane's interesting because it hasn't got its residential amenity yet. You know, those people are going to be there in the future, similar to other parts of the district where the houses have been approved but they're not finished yet, but we know what the issues are going to be. So for this one in particular, we're trying to come to a way of making the parking work but keep it resilient, that if we have to do so. Now, if there's a charging structure, now we haven't said that there will absolutely be a charge for parking. If the parking amount's right and the applicant doesn't need to have a levy on that possibility, a payment associated with it, then we won't. But if people are paying to park, then we'll be looking to them and saying you can't make a profit and put the impact onto our local roads. If that car park was half empty and our streets were half full with the parking, we would say your parking levy's not right, you're making money, but you're putting the pressure onto our local streets, so you're going to have to review that strategy, change your parking levies or administer some sort of improvement on our local highway. So it's a very well structured exercise, because if the money's there and something has to be done, then we'll take advantage of that opportunity. And I'm pretty sure that most applicants don't want to be disruptive to their local residents. Similar to the noise conditions, we're looking for conditions which are protective for the residents in these locations. So it's a balancing exercise. We can't ultimately predict what the correct solution is here from day one, but the condition is protective enough to make sure that it will be the right levels of parking and the right response on the public highway, as we understand what this stadium has as an impact on the local community.
Okay, any more questions on highways, or can we move on to landscaping? Yep. Okay, any questions on landscaping issues? Councillor Jones.
I read in the document that I think a bund 10 metres wide by 2 metres high is mentioned somewhere, but also in one of the conditions, John, I think it says as high as a bund as high as possible. What kind of scale can you suggest where, the height of the bunds?
Yeah, the bund is proposed along the sort of Grove Lane side, along here. It's an outline scheme, so we don't have the details of that. What we're looking for is to provide, we don't want just a small bund, we want something that's more natural in form so that it blends in with the landscape, so it's varies in height and width all the way across. The bund also will have planting on the top, so it's higher with trees and planting, a double hedge line. So those details haven't been submitted, but the landscape strategy gives us an indication of the sort of things that we would get, and it's along the top with sort of natural planting.
Can you just describe how the landscaping has changed since last time, or is it just now documented? I'm not quite sure.
Yeah, the landscaping it's not submitted with this application. What we've got is more detail in an indicative plan. So this is the master plan, but with that there's also an indicative strategy. So what it does is gives us more reassurance of the sort of things they're looking to do and the detail which will come forward in a reserved matters at a later stage. But what it does is it shows it's more of a greener finish. So we've got the different areas of the car park with different surfaces, and it also shows the parkland setting around the side of the building, the stadium, these areas over here. And what it does is show more intent and detail about the sort of planting and the sort of setting and landscaping. You've got the areas of orchard in here and here, the woodland area here, and then the suds areas as well. So what it just shows more detail really about what's going to come forward in the future with the full landscape detail.
Councillor Binns.
Thank you. So following on from that, John, then you're anticipating that the bund will be sort of undulating. There'll be planting on the top. Will that be tree planting, or will that be plant planting, bushes and things like that, hedgerows? And so what do you anticipate the highest point of any of the bunds will be? Thank you.
To be fair, as John has just said, we don't have that information at this stage. But what we are hoping to achieve is something that looks natural in the landscape. So if we were looking at a bund that was 5 or 6 metres in height of an artificial shape, then that's not the type of bund that we're looking for. As well as planting, it will depend on what looks appropriate. So I don't think that we're equally looking necessarily at a bund that has necessarily planting all the way along the top of it. What we want to create is something that provides that screening where it's necessary but looks natural. So I'm anticipating that it will differ along the length of the bund in order to create the end result that we want is something that looks natural in the landscape.
I'll just add that, yeah, the bund does act as a back corridor as well, so it will have trees on there, but what we're wanting is a variation, so there's a mix of types and sizes to make it look like it's developed naturally. So it will have trees on it, but it's just a mix of different types.
Councillor Binns.
So the overall effect then is that there will be less of an impact, a visual impact, from those residents along Grove Lane to the car park and to the stadium, proposed stadium, albeit that at the moment they have a vista they can see for miles right across that open escarpment. So they will then have something that is proposed, let's say, 5 metres in height, where before there was nothing at all. That's your suggestion?
Yeah, what the landscaping will do is it will break up views, so it will provide larger trees within it, so the stadium and the parking will be broken up with all that. So you will get a view of more of green trees and more of natural tree cover, yes.
Any more questions?
I was just going to say, so just moving on from that then, so the residents along the Grove Lane have either the choice of seeing the stadium or seeing a bund. That's the implication.
Well, I'm saying that they'll see the landscaping, which is part of it. So it'll be, yeah. And the idea, what we're trying to achieve is a soft, natural look. So it will be a natural landscaped view, yeah.
Councillor Tomlin.
Thank you, Chair. I'm sure the question is in the papers, and I just can't find it at the moment, the answer rather. I see in condition 20 that the soft landscape works shall be completed in the first planting season following the completion of the stadium. Could I ask where it's detailed when the bund you're discussing and also the planting of trees would be needing to be undertaken by?
Yeah, obviously we want the landscaping planted as soon as possible. The only problem is we obviously don't want any construction traffic or anything like that to damage what's been planted. So we've got there's various ecology conditions as well, which will set out how the timings and the planting will be carried out. So it's a combination of those and the ecological design strategy, which will outline when and how the planting will take place, but our intention is to try and get as much as soon as possible to allow it to develop and grow.
I think if I may, in answer to your question, yes, the trees and the bund would be encompassed within the soft landscaping. So the hard landscaping areas would be those areas of hard surfacing, possibly around the building and maybe in part of the car park. Everything else would be considered by us to be soft landscaping.
Councillor Lydon.
Question really for clarity, but I'm repeating myself. I am right, this is an outline application, yeah? And do we apply this scrutiny when we looked at 180 houses being built around the corner from me, about the type of trees and the type of bonding? No, we didn't. We approved the overall one, and then that matter came up as and when it was approved, it was a full one. Is that right? That's our normal customer practice.
This is an outline application, so the detailed landscaping will come in at reserved matters. Which
if we are subject to approval, and if we don't have a full
we would then scrutinise the types of trees as we would in any scheme that comes before us.
So, at that stage, if it was approved at an outline stage and a full application coming in, we could consider, or those of us who may be here, as or when that time could then consider this in more detail and whether or not to make it a firmer condition, or whether or not we want to go out and see the level of the trees or the height of what's being proposed, how many feet they are apart, etc., etc.
Yeah, the details of what trees planted where will come in as the landscaping later on. What we have to do now is put in the key conditions that require it to be submitted.
Thank you.
Councillor Clifton.
Thank you, Chair. In paragraph 304, it says that 1,300 metres of hedge would be translocated. Do we have any indication of how successful that kind of translocation is?
Well, it is a new idea, but they do have examples where it has taken place. So the expert advice I'm getting is that it is possible, and the conditions require it to be carried out. And if it's not, they'd have to mitigate if it doesn't work or plant other options. But the advice from our ecologist is that it would work.
Councillor Williams.
Thanks. Do you have any drawing, reconstruction, whatever, that might show us what it will look like from the motorway as you come down the M5? You know, how, just some idea of how high it is above the embankment and that sort of thing.
I don't think I've got one from the motorway. I think this one's from Eastington side, so it's looking down the hill.
It's just that people are referring to it, you know, as an iconic building and this, that and the other. And from my recollection of that stretch of road as you're coming north-south, I don't think you'd see it.
Yeah, from the motorway, probably you'd only see the top. Where you might is you will. We're not saying you'll hide the building, but you will see it as you come into Stroud on the 419. You will see the building, but I would. It's not going to stand out like the incinerator and surprise drivers like that.
Okay, any more questions on landscaping? In which case, we've still got heritage, design, ecology to go. Do committee members feel they'd like to take a comfort break now, or should we crack on and finish the questions? Anybody feel we should have a comfort break now, or should we just carry on? Okay, I'm going to take that as we carry on. Okay, so we've done landscaping, heritage impact on the heritage assets around the site. Anybody got any questions on that? No? Yes? Bearing in mind that the canal wasn't one of the heritage assets affected.
Thank you, Chair. I feel I ought to, because I did last time. I know it is covered in the report, but can you, John, could you just explain, has there been any improvement on the impact, particularly on Grove Farm, but the other heritage assets down there because of the landscaping, which I know Dorcas just discussed? Can you just talk about that?
Yeah, well, obviously the heritage assets haven't moved. What the scheme has done, we've got more reassurance about the landscaping and the detail provided in that. We still think there is a less than substantial harm, so it's then the balance that you have to do, and the scheme, the benefits of the scheme being enhanced with the community access and those sort of things. So as officers we still feel that there's a positive balance in that area.
Any more questions on heritage impact? Okay. Design. Any questions on design? No? Okay. Ecology. Sorry. Oh, okay. Councillor Williams.
We've been told repeatedly that it is, you know, what's the word? It's very sustainable design because it's timber and things. Do we actually have any numbers? Because presumably you use a lot of energy to mould the wood. I would guess petrochemical resins stick them together. It's stressed, I understand, with steel cables in certain directions. And I don't suppose they just stick tree trunks in holes. I would guess it's probably got a concrete footings and that sort of thing. So there must be quite a lot of energy and non-renewables going in there, I would have thought.
Yeah, well, we're not saying that the whole building is made of wood. It's the upper bit. There is concrete involved, but what the applicant has submitted, the embedded carbon per seat of this stadium is 150, which is compared with other stadiums. Wembley would be 600. What else we've got? The Aviva Stadium is 290.
Sorry, was that per seat, did you say?
Yeah. So this one is only 150, so it's significantly less than well, benchmarked against other modern stadiums. So it is significantly better. And we've got the controls in the conditions, not only that they have to do this design, but they also have to do all the other sustainable elements. So we've got the SUDS and the energy for there's a biomass boiler, solar panels and things like that. They can do all those elements, and they have to demonstrate that they've done it. So we've got the control and within the conditions, so we're confident that it will be achieved.
Councillor Jones.
John just mentioned solar panels, and we spent a great deal of time talking about solar panels reference a school at, on the Greater Albury recently. Can you tell me where they're going to be? Is that being decided yet?
No, we don't have that detail, but what we're not wanting to do is just stick them on the edge and spoil the design, basically. What we're wanting is they're integrated into the proposal going forward, so they can look at things like putting them on street lamps or putting them on other structures or putting them in less prominent locations. So it's not like an eco badge that you just stick on the outside. They will be fully integrated into the design.
Any more questions? What have we just done? We've just finished design. Any more questions on design? In which case we'll move on to ecology, which I don't anticipate a lot of questions on. Anybody want to ask any questions on ecology? Nope. Councillor Miles.
From the officer. I read one of the trees that you're thinking of planting in the pit parkland setting is ash, but that's got a lot of ash dieback. In future years, if they die, is there a condition they're replaced?
Yeah, well, we haven't agreed what type of trees they are. That's to come in later. But what the conditions provide is that there's ongoing management and maintenance. So if they do lose some trees, we would expect the management strategy to replace them with more appropriate types if there's an issue like dieback. So yeah, we're expecting it to be managed and appropriately looked after in the future.
Okay, if we haven't got any more questions on ecology, then I think we'll take the comfort break that we plan to have. What's the time? I can't see the clock. 10 minutes be enough for everybody? Back at 5 past? Okay, we're restarting. Everybody can find the seats. We did actually only get as far as ecology on the questions. We've still got any other questions on any other topics. Does anybody have any more questions on topics that they feel we've missed? Or can we move on from that? Yep. Okay.
Chair.
Yes. Sorry, Councillor Jones.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Vince mentioned that he had spent a great deal of time working with Stroud District Council looking at alternative sites. What did that amount to, this sequential testing?
Well, there's no policy requirement for a sequential test, but as in the papers, it shows that they've looked at and we've considered other sites. The problem is the Stroud Valleys are very constrained, so you can't fit anything in, and then you go on the hills, you're in the AONB, so there's a greater landscape impact. So that pushes you sort of Stonehouse direction. The other criteria is having it near the main population centres, which is the fan base. They've given us data to show where the season tickets sales are concentrated. They're in Stonehouse, sort of Ebley and Keynes Cross, those sort of areas. So it's got to be near or connected to those areas. So then that rules out or puts other sites that are less favourable, sort of further down Camway or up at near the county incinerator. So it limits the options. So that's how they've arrived at this site. Then on this site, they've looked at different options. Whilst it's outlined, they've looked at placing the stadium in different parts of the site. And we've come north of the 419, as indicated now, is to mitigate and limit harm on the specific site.
Thanks for that. You mentioned the energy from waste plant, which I think probably satisfies geographically similar criteria that the proposed site does, in that it's near to the motorway and not far from Stonehouse and what have you. What else did that fail on?
Yeah, that site or that area is heavily constrained by the motorway connections and the highway network, and the site is also not available for this sort of development.
Okay, if there are no more questions, does somebody wish to propose a motion to accept officer advice or otherwise? Or would you like me to propose officer advice from the chair? Sorry, Steve.
Yeah, I forgot to put the microphone on. Can you hear me now, mate? Thank you. Subject to some conditions, which I wouldn't mind talking about, but accepting that most of that, if we do choose to approve, could be covered in the full application, I propose we accept officer's advice and approve the application. Quite happily go into further details, but I'd prefer to be able to hear other people's perspectives first and then be able to answer those concerns. A couple of key points I'd make is, some of you might know my mum's very poorly down in Exeter.
Sorry to cut you off, Steve, but
Sorry.
shall we just see if you've got a seconder first?
Yeah, but, sorry? You want me to see if I've got a seconder? Okay, sorry, I am very tired, so forgive me.
Okay, no problem. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Clifton? Okay. So, Councillor Lydon, do you want to speak now?
I will, and hopefully we'll have a constructive debate. I want to put this into a bit of context first. Of course, we all respect and want to listen to local considerations, and from our own parishes and all the towns here that we live in. But we also, and that is right and proper, but we also have a wider responsibility to the whole district and the wider community. And certainly, looking at things like this is a bit different. This ain't another housing estate. It's not a supermarket. It's not a business unit. We're looking at something here which will give us a major opportunity to contribute to the wider vitality of the area. and in terms of the health and well-being, in terms of the business, social cohesion, etc. Leisure and sport has been a proven way of demonstrating that. And certainly, as I mentioned, I've been down in Exeter quite a lot in the last week because my mum's reportedly down there. And I took the opportunity, a guy there gave me a history of Exeter Rugby Club, which in many ways, when you read that, is a similar situation. Exeter were a pretty low third-tier rugby team. Who were based in an area of Exeter which was very run down. A guy came in as an entrepreneur and took him over, then proposed that he build a new stadium if or when they ever got promoted to the Premiership, and that they move across there and then go for the big time. The area of St Thomas where they were didn't want them to go, primarily because there was a dog track there going around the pitch, and said it makes a massive and huge contribution to the local area. However, Exeter City Council did accept the reasons for going ahead with it, and interesting enough, it's right next door to a motorway junction, and it's right next door to a park and ride, and it's right next door to very restricted parking. And as a regular visitor there, whatever process and system they've got in there, I'd recommend you look at, because they don't get the on-street parking. The closest you can park to the ground, and I'm a blue badge holder, you have to use park and ride, or you have to walk. There's no way you get anywhere near the ground. So that's one thing I'd say. But I'm also talking about the actual advantage this gives a place like Stroud. We as the council, I think, on all parties have taken a brave step to support the canal project, and I hope that we will get somewhere close to the fruition of that and actually finishing that off. And I see this in the same light. I see this as a real opportunity to lift us up and to look at the future. I accept there are some material considerations. Obviously, the MPPF is important. NDPs are important. Our own local plan, of course, it's important. However, it's our job as elected members to be able to balance those considerations out with all the technical advice we get from your good selves to actually make those decisions. And I actually feel rather embarrassed, certainly for all of you guys, colleagues up there, and the various other agencies, that have come back and said, well, actually, not just once but twice, and how many years this has been going around the loop. You know, things like, I understand it was we as the council that advised the stadium being moved north of the A419. It's we as the council that said, no, it was raised tonight, oh, it should have all come in as one application. No, we as the council advised the applicant, I think about 2 years ago, not to bring the whole thing in together. It was us that said, pull the eco part and look at it as the stadium. So come on, people, this is about being fair. And I'm going to say this, if this was another large employer or a large business in the area, building on and bringing investment to the area and adding to the cultural value of this area, I think there'd be a far more support and far less scrutiny that's been exercised here tonight in the public domain, etc., etc. I'm asking members to truly judge this on its merits, to truly look at this as an outline planning permission. I think, certainly as proposer, I'm quite happy to accept all the numerous conditions we've talked about the noise abatement, about the community use, about the size of the bung, the height of the trees, etc. I would ask, though, of course, members, when we come back to looking at similar applications, you also apply the same level of scrutiny. Because certainly, as being a member of this committee and sat through it for 4 years, longer than that, on rare occasions I've not seen anything like this level of scrutiny on an outline application. And as leader, I've sat there and heard a lot of this stuff, and I find this tonight and the behaviour at the last meeting interesting. So I would recommend strongly that we as the committee support this. We value this, we embrace change, we look at this as a forward opportunity, and we use the conditions, etc., that we have and the tools we have to ensure that there will be issues that will come out of this and will have to be risen. But we've got a track record of doing that, and I applaud the applicant and I applaud this coming forward, and I look forward to seeing it taking place. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Lydon. Councillor Clifton, do you want to speak as a seconder now? Or? Yeah. Sorry, later. Okay. Right. We're into debate, so hands up. Councillor Cooper.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, the previous one was refused because it's contrary to many of our policies. This one's very similar, and it's accepted that it's contrary to our local plan. we've had communication from the applicant and has addressed 4 issues which have been raised. Clearly made a genuine effort to satisfy us on those 4 issues. I mean, the questions I have asked myself really is, have all the issues been addressed? Have sufficient mitigation measures been introduced to satisfy all objections? Or, in fact, are some issues so fundamental that no amount of mitigation can actually satisfactorily solve them? Obviously, I understand the difficulty we've heard just now about relocating. And, I mean, one has to separate firstly, I have to separate my feelings, my emotional feelings, from actual planning rules. And we have to discuss this, we have to decide this on planning rules, not on emotions. It's sort of head versus heart type situation. And I'm not convinced about the economic benefit to the district. Sorry, I'll carry on without interruption, please.
Sorry, Councillor Marjoram, could you please not join in the debate? No, I said Councillor Marjoram. Yes.
So I'm not convinced about the economic benefit to the district. I am convinced that the loss of Forest Green Rovers to Nailsworth will have quite a big effect. And I think it's been understated, not just economically, but I think in other ways. They're obviously an integral part of the town. And so the fundamental issue for me is my unease for the development generally. It's sited on greenfields, enough of which already we're going to lose through development for housing and stuff like that. So we should be trying wherever possible to protect the countryside. And I acknowledge that in spite of all the efforts that have been made, I remain unconvinced about whether we should grant permission for this.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to contribute to debate? Councillor Reid?
Yes, it's on. Did you say me, Martin? Yeah. I live in Nailsworth, and I've lived in Nailsworth for nearly 40 years, and I know that the Forest Green Football Club has developed there for 130 years and has contributed to the economic, social and cultural nature of the independent nature of Nailsworth. I'm very open-minded in relationship to this proposal to possibly transfer Forest Green Football Stadium to another location. And it could be an opportunity of transition if there is careful consideration between the proposal and the roots of the football stadium and the new lawn and where it is. And I do understand the nature of it's not possible for that to be a planning consideration because, as Nigel says, it's the issue of the heart and the head. And I'm still open to considering the possibility of having greater conversations with the Town Council and the applicant of this proposal to deepen conversations in this transitional process.
Councillor Jones.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Lydon mentioned that our wider responsibilities to the district. I recognise that we often have to deal with that when you attend parish or town councils and they want you to do exactly as they wish, and that's not always what we can do. We've got to act, we've got to take a wider view than that. Forest Green Rovers is a really important part of our district, and it's one of the reasons that we are known beyond the boundaries of our district. On this stadium, design is subjective. I personally think the drawings and what have you are stunning. I think it's a great idea, and I welcome the positive aspect that the applicant has now agreed to include it within a 106 agreement so that would be delivered if it was given permission. However, it is outside the local plan and neighbourhood development plan. No one would challenge that. And we are here to provide scrutiny, and Councillor Lydon questioned us on that a little bit, on the amount of scrutiny we're giving it. But this is a football stadium. It's not a pair of semis. And I think there's lots of people interested in what we're doing here. This would have a huge impact, unlike some smaller applications. So I don't think it's unreasonable that we test some of the proposals and what officers are discussing. I recognise the benefits of this. I question, and I have questioned previously, if there might not be an alternative site, and I alluded to that earlier on, but I appreciate that that's has been tested and found wanting. I do recognise the business benefits of it, and although I think there will probably be challenges, this will be an expensive building to put up. But also there is inevitable harm, and Nailsworth is one of them. The impact on Nailsworth, the history that goes with the club there. I am concerned about its location, the impact on Grove Lane, Greater Oldbury as well, which is a really important part of our district. It was quite controversial when it came into the plan previously, and it's important that we make that a success. And from what I've seen of it so far, it looks like a nice place to live, and I want it to stay that way. William Morris House is obviously a huge challenge, and I'm not sure that everything has been addressed there, and I know the people those in charge at William Morris House would say there's work to be done still there. Ultimately, it comes down, with all planning of this nature, to be a balance of harm versus benefits. I'm not convinced that the benefits are sufficient to vote in favour of this.
Councillor Williams.
Thanks, Chair. I supported this, not exactly reluctantly, but I supported this last time, and I see no real reason to not support it again. I think it's a fairly finely balanced decision. I feel a bit more reassured about the noise in William Morris House than I did before, and I hope that can be resolved to everybody's satisfaction. I don't honestly think that it's going to bring a huge amount economically or otherwise to the district. I'm sure that if you walk along the Cotswold Way or you drive down the M5, the things that you'll remember about the Stroud district will be the incinerator and even the creamery, which I can't remember what they call it these days. Muller, is it? Yeah, which you can see again for that chimney and the silos you can see for miles, and there are defining features, I'm afraid, when it comes to that sort of thing. But on the other hand, I can't see that it's bringing that much damage. It's not going to be a blot on the landscape. It will bring a degree of business, although I think people in Stonehouse are a bit optimistic if they really think it's going to bring them much business. I think on the whole, the balance is in favour, but I think it's one of those where the balance is in favour and you cannot really say an awful lot more. And as to the amount of time we've spent on it compared with other things, the other major applications we get are normally already in the plan. You think about the housing ones, they typically have been gone, they've been through council, they've been part of the district plan, and we're really arguing about density and which way they face and that sort of thing in the end. This isn't in the plan. We could reasonably turn it down for that reason alone. So, we need to give it time. But no, I think on balance, it'll be a good thing, and look forward to see it getting built.
Councillor Miles.
Tom has said just about everything I wanted to say, and I don't see much value in repeating what's already been said. But I agree with Tom.
Councillor Binns.
Thank you. I do agree with Jenny. I would like to just stress the fact that I do agree that Forest Green Rovers is a great football business, an organisation. I agree that Dale Vince is a fantastic football owner. And I think that the work that they do in their community, to a point, is laudable. That's fantastic. That's where it stops. We have to look at the impact that this new stadium will have on the whole, and it will be the whole district. We've got Whitminster, Eastington, Nailsworth, all the town councils who represent thousands of people. This will have a huge impact on them. CPRE have said it will have a huge impact on our rural area forever. And if Forest Green didn't have a stadium, this would be different, but Forest Green do have a stadium. I know it's not a great design. I know they have shortage of water, according to Mr. Vince, and they have a problem with the electricity supply. That's fine. That's not a planning issue. But they do have a stadium. They have a stadium that reaches a 5,000, I think it is, capacity. They have parking. They could improve the parking. They can improve transport, which I think is great for sustainability. They have a stadium. That I can't see the justification for the impact on thousands of people's lives on this multitude of green fields that will be gone forever for the fact that there will be yet another Forest Green football stadium. If Forest Green didn't exist, fine, but it does exist. What I would love, at the design, I think is fantastic. I don't have a problem with the design. I think it's beautiful. But I do look at the landscape impact of such a beautiful design. What I would like is if Forest Green actually looked at the Forest Green stadium they have at the moment and said, right, there will be an impact on the people that come to see us, but we could actually, let's try and find a way where we could rejig the stadium we have. Let's redesign the stadium we have in Forest Green. Nailsworth is Forest Green Rovers. Forest Green Rovers is Nailsworth. You can't, after decades and decades of history and community work, break the two up. And there will be an impact on Nailsworth businesses. There has to be an impact on Nailsworth businesses. And all the, the impact assessment has said that there will be an impact. It's not going to be zero. It's not going to be negative. It will be a positive impact on bed and breakfast. It might be coffee shops. Whatever it is, there will be an impact on businesses. So Nailsworth Town Council are legitimate. The fact that they say that they have done their studies and they've spoken to the shopkeepers, the Chamber of Trade. There will be an impact on Nailsworth. So do we want, for the sake of a new stadium, which is not, I feel not necessary, do we want to impact on so many thousands of people's lives, as well as the William Morris School? Do we want to impact on so many people for the fact that there is another great design of a stadium? Let's look again at a redesign of Forest Green and keep the stadium where it belongs.
Councillor Clifton.
Thank you, Chair. It sounds to me as though the current site at Nailsworth is clearly not adequate in terms of power and electricity, and I know, having tried to get down Tinkley Lane on the wrong days, that there are issues with parking and traffic. So they need a new stadium, they need to relocate, and if there isn't anywhere in the district, what might they do? Relocate out of the district? Football teams have done that. They've relocated to places a long, long way away, and then all that connection with Nailsworth and everything, that would be completely gone, and Nailsworth would suffer. And it wouldn't be so sustainable because far more people would be travelling to get to goodness knows where. So there would be an economic loss to the district if that happened. Maybe that's far-fetched, but I think it's a possibility. I understand the issues about the economic loss for Nailsworth. I don't know how big that really would be. We've heard conflicting figures. I think Councillor Kay's assessment that everyone in the stadium goes down and spends £14.67 in Nailsworth is a little bit optimistic. I'm sure that an awful lot of people who go to the match and then go home. Certainly people from Cam and Jersey drive in and drive back. So, I'm not sure about the economic effect on Nailsworth, and places find other ways of bouncing back. And I think there'll be benefits to the district because, as has been stated, this is an iconic building. It's an amazing building, and I think it could become a tourist attraction. I mean, at the moment we're known for the flipping incinerator, but also people know about tea-based services, for which this council has won praise. And I think this could be something like that, and if different kinds of events eventually take part in that. I'm not suggesting anything noisy, but people would come to Stroud maybe just to see it. I mean, it's not every small district council that's got a building of this quality in the district, so I think it could actually bring benefits, as people have said. it sounds to me as though it's going to be pretty sustainable. There are obviously things that need to be tightened up. I am reassured on the aspects of the noise from the point of William Morris House. What we've heard this evening has reassured me on that point. And there are other aspects to do with the sound difficulties like the bunds and landscaping that need to be looked into. But those will come back and those will be negotiated. So overall, I think this could be a good thing for the district.
Councillor Lydon, do you want to sum up and reply to any...
Yeah, I do. I won't be long now. I just want to... Another rugby club that some of you might have heard of, London Wasps, who were based in High Wycombe, who made all the efforts they could to stay in High Wycombe and approached not just High Wycombe Council, other local councils about staying there. And for a variety of reasons, including many of the ones we've heard tonight, couldn't do it. Some of you here support Bath, and of course Bath haven't had any issues at all in terms of making their ground bigger or actually doing that location, and in fact only very recently threatened to uproot and go to Swindon. Wasps in the end said enough's enough and moved to Coventry. So a brand new purpose-built stadium near the motorway, which was owned by the council actually at that time. If you go to France, you'll see facilities such as this and all the other things being proposed, actually not just condoned in terms of planning, but actually built and paid for by public bodies because they accept all the public realm that goes with it and the benefit that brings, not just to old people like me, but to kids, to people who go to work, people who have pretty drudgery lives by and large, could be argued. This gives them a chance to lift themselves up. There's a documentary with Matt Busby, some of you might remember, the old Man U manager, who said the responsibility to you players is you go out on a Saturday and give those people a bit of magic for 90 minutes. Now, I want to make sure that the people who come and work and live here have those opportunities. And certainly I think sport has the opportunity to do that. In terms of the conditions, I made no secret. I think if we need to have a condition on landscaping and the height of the shrubs and the depth and the width of the trees and what type of tree, of course we can do that at the full stage. I think it's important as well we do condition the community use and ensure that the community access is enshrined and is actually managed, and there's some process which ensures that's a fair and objective way of doing it. I also think in terms of the noise abatement, I get totally confused, and I make no secret about the various statistics you use. But I must admit, as a layperson, I've found a lot of this hard work, and I know there's people who don't like me saying this, but for something that's being proposed, and for existing residents who live within half a mile of the M5, I find that many of these issues about noise, I find it very hard to take it all in, to be frank. But I think it's important. Hang on. So I'm allowed to have my view. I do think, though, it's right and proper that when that mitigation strategy, if that's the right term, is developed as part of the full application, that we as members, and we do encourage, of course we do encourage, the owners of Ecotricity to talk to William Morris House and look at examples of best practice elsewhere. But that is also brought back to committee. And I think we'd all be happy to do that and ensure we have as much scrutiny as possible. We may end up complaining about walking around loads of muddy fields as we do in Western Stonehouse, but it's important to get this right. And on Sue's point, yes, of course, we should encourage and do our best to broker, if it's needed, those discussions about any subsequent future of what's going to happen at the current new law, about what will take place there and what will happen there. And I understand there have been some quite exciting proposals. Certainly a guy I know wanted to propose a few years ago, and Tom knows, and I put a nature centre there. I mean, I don't know how realistic that is, but I think it's important that that is considered as well. So I support the scrutiny that people have done. I actually accept that it's important and it's right and proper. But my last comment would be, this has gone on for years. We've had all sorts of expert opinions. A lot of money's been spent on this from the consultants' reports. The officers, who many of us on occasion give a hard time to, have gone through this with numerous times for a fine-tooth comb. We've agreed it's finely balanced. I think it should end here tonight and we approve the outline application. So I ask your support.
Right, before we go to a vote, officers have an amendment that they have to put on the condition on the opening times because Jerry will...
Thank you, Chairman. As John mentioned at the beginning, the recommendation is as set out in the papers. and John mentioned with some alteration to condition 13, which is on page 113, and condition 48 on page 130. Councillor Tomlin, I'm grateful to you for pointing out the anomaly in relation to condition 13 that's in the papers. And what I would like to do, if I may, is to read out to members a revised wording for that condition, which I hope will clarify that. So it's very similar to the layout of the condition as set out in the papers, but the amendment should read, the stadium hereby approved shall not be open to the public on football match days outside the hours of 9 a.m. to 11 p.m. The stadium building shall not be open to customers / members of the public for ancillary uses outside the hours of 7 a.m. to 11 p.m. Monday to Saturday, and 10 a.m. to 11 p.m. on Sundays, bank holidays and public holidays, unless otherwise approved by the local planning authority. I can just clarify that the amendments to condition 48 on page 130 are those which John referred to at the beginning of his, or at the end of his presentation. Thank you.
Right, can I just check that the proposer and seconder are okay with the amendments? Yep. Okay.
Sorry, can I just check while you... So, the issues around landscaping, community use and the noise, does that form part of this motion, or does that get minuted to be recognised if or when we approve and if there's a full application?
Well, those issues are covered by the conditions. And as we mentioned earlier, some of those may or may not result in details as part of a reserved matters application. If you are asking whether or not a reserved matters application should come back to this committee, then that is, you can request that. That has happened on land west of Stonehouse. So obviously we can ensure that any future detail of that nature comes back to committee for approval.
I'm happy to accept that. My seconder is to accept that as part of this motion. And I know we can't insist, but it would be nice to say that we as the council will actively support or broker discussions between the football club and local residents, etc., about the future of the new law. I mean, can I be cheeky? As chief exec, you'd agree to do that, wouldn't you? Well, no, one has to. You would? Yes, she would. Yeah. Is that okay? Sorry, Chair, but it's important, though. If we're going to try and do this, let's try and recognise...
It's a bit above my pay grade, but yes, you've got...
Yeah, it's important that we try and recognise people's concerns and address them. That's what I'm trying to do. Probably not very well. Okay?
Okay, before we actually go to the vote, the voting won't be switched on just yet. I think you should all have a helpful little sticker on your machine that reminds you which is yes, no and abstain, just so I don't have to repeat it. The sticker fairies have provided them. Just to say that if anybody feels they need a minute, this is an important decision, if anybody feels they need a minute to reflect and be sure that they've definitely decided which way they want to vote, otherwise we'll carry on. And the vote will be displayed on the screen, the names, the public might want to do this with the names and how they voted. If anybody feels that they've made a mistake in voting, press the wrong button and that what's on the screen doesn't reflect the way they want to vote, then please stick your hand up, tell me. I'll be accepting the vote once I'm sure that everybody has voted the way they intended to vote, and then the vote will be closed. So is everybody okay with that? Everybody ready to vote? Yep. Okay. You could open the voting. And it's 2 for yes, 3 for no, 4 to abstain. That's everybody. So that is carried. And thank you to everybody for attending and for all your contributions and your input. Good night. Safe journeys home.